And what's unique about us, like you said, we have our own little sandbox, our test washes right near our facility. We build the equipment, we build the motor control centers for them, and the motor or in the all the in electrical controls, and we write our own software. So we're kind of a unique, I think, company where we basically check the box in all those different areas to create some really unique equipment.
Welcome to the Modern Car Wash Podcast. I'm your host, Dan St. Jacques. Today's guest is a repeat guest, the podcast's first ever guest, Tom Hoffman Jr. from Hoffman Car Wash. Today he joined to talk about Hoffman Car Wash's newest location that opened up in November, as well as the latest developments for Hoffman Car Wash, innovative car wash equipment, and what the future looks like for both companies going forward. Hope you enjoyed today's show, so here it is. Well, Tommy, welcome back to the Modern Car Wash Podcast. You were the podcast's first guest, and now it's a year anniversary here, just over that, so glad to have you back on.
Seems a lot longer.
And pretty wild then at that point. We were talking about Hoffman Car Wash navigating the COVID, well, we would call it at that point the COVID era, but here we are still today, I guess, still navigating those same waters. Big change at the end of last year. For our listeners who don't necessarily know, under the umbrella of Hoffman Development, there were 9 Jiffy Lube locations. There was Jiffy Lube franchisee and 4 of the top Jiffy Lube locations in the system. And up a couple of years ago, 5 in the top 10, if I'm not mistaken, in terms of overall volume. You just talk about the change that happened at the end of last year and sort of what that means for the car wash going forward.
Yeah, we made a decision to sell our Jiffy Lube locations. There was a lot of activity in the Jiffy Lube industry. They're expanding their footprint. Building new stores. We haven't built a new store since 2004. Our focus has really shifted to developing our express car wash footprint in our market, and it just seemed like now is the time to maybe sell and really concentrate on developing our car washes. 7 of our 9 locations were at car washes, so really nothing has really changed. The same people are there. So when the new company bought the Jiffy Lube locations from us, they kept all our people, and they're actually going to expand the footprint in the Albany market, and they have stores all over the country. So it's really, we really are hoping it's going to be a great thing for the people that stayed behind at Jiffy Lube, more opportunities, more growth opportunities. Even as we expand our car wash footprint, we're going to be now looking for bigger properties and offer them like a neighbor site to ours, and they'll be building Jiffy Lubes next to us in some locations.
And so for a lot of those, like you mentioned, 7 of the 9 are essentially they're attached to car washes.
Right.
But like you're saying, having the same people in place, people who are familiar with the company, I guess that probably helps too, the relationship between the two businesses and understanding kind of what the expectations are to make sure that there's still, even though the two companies now aren't necessarily tied together the same way, there's still some sort of a symbiotic relationship, I guess, between the two.
Right. It was important really for both of us that our customers weren't affected at all. So, these guys are really concerned about, treating the customers right and growing the business. And so are we. So it's really a really transparent transaction. Basically, the customers really shouldn't see any different. Again, we were a franchisee, we were operating it as a Jiffy Lube. There's not a whole lot of change going to occur, and especially because they kept all the people. So so far so good. It's been a great relationship during the transaction. They're a really good company, and we're looking forward to them growing in the future alongside of us at new locations.
Now, the last time you were on too, the number 18 tunnel had just opened up. That was here in Latham. How has that looked after the first year, and what have you seen there so far in terms of the growth in that new store?
Yeah, that's been a challenging location. It was fairly close to an existing location where we had a lot of unlimited membership. So there are a lot of people on our unlimited program that are going to that location. So sign-ups and new unlimiteds have been a challenge on that road. And also there's a heavy business community in that area, a lot of office buildings, and they're still not fully back to work yet. So the traffic on that road in Latham isn't quite back to normal yet. So it's been more challenging than our typical experience opening up a new location. It's taking a little longer to ramp that one up.
Which is wild, because we talked about, like you mentioned when we started here, that trying to navigate the COVID era and people being back to work, and here we are still 2022. It's still not quite back to full pace there, but and then now, as we come onto this show, number 19 just opened up a few months ago. Talk to us a little bit about that site, what that site looks like, because that's a lot different than the other sites that have opened up
right.
in the last,
So that location went out to bid before COVID started. Construction started during COVID, and we just opened in early November. We have 10 locations, including that one, under development. So that's the first of the 10 that will be open in the next year and a half. And what we're a little nervous about is inflation. Inflation has really hit the construction industry. Also, supply chain issues. It took us longer to build this location than usual, and it was because of supply chain issues. And as we're bidding out these other locations, we have we have 4 under construction right now. And as we bid those 4 out, they kept getting more and more expensive to build. And it's actually about 20 to 25% increase in cost to build a new location. So the math is changing on how we're going to be able to ramp up cash flow and become profitable. We're probably going to have to take price increases, but it's definitely getting more challenging to build. This new location that we built is 160-foot express exterior. We also, because of the width of the property, we were able to develop 2 in-bay automatics attached to it and 3 self-serve bays in addition to the free vacuum system. So it was a rather large development for us. And again, opening in November was nice. We have the salt season, and the place is doing actually pretty well for us. We're excited about it.
And that was the first site to have self-serve and in-bays in how long? When was the last
Since
site?
2004 in Queensbury when we opened that location. So it's been quite a few years.
And you talked about the 10 stores essentially the next couple of years. The last time you were on, you were talking about the ability to have this sort of, for Hoffman Car Wash to now have a sort of an accelerated development cycle. What has really contributed to that, the ability? Because prior to 2018 or so, if you look at the number of washes that were built leading up to that point for Hoffman Car Wash to now saying 10 in the pipeline, basically, what has really contributed to that, or what's helped make that possible?
Well, hiring good people, also having, building the infrastructure. We created a new office complex. We created an equipment company to help, build new innovative equipment to differentiate our locations from the competition, and also heavily on automation to reduce and eliminate prepping the car on the way in. It just took a few years, but we have an install staff, and we have construction people and a development team, finding new locations, going to planning boards, bank financing. We're getting all these puzzle pieces in place to be able to grow faster than we ever used to.
And a lot of the times, when you're moving into different territories or dealing with different people, if you look in terms of the towns and getting things permitted and getting things across, Hoffman Car Wash has been established in this area for a long time, but I'm assuming there's still, and I know, our director of development, Marty Andrews, sits right behind me. I know there's still a lot of roadblocks that end up coming along the way in developing new sites. So how do you deal with that and kind of pushing those things along, or sort of anticipating that you're going to have these issues when you look at your timeline for developing?
Every municipality seems to be so different. So it's really kind of exciting and fun to navigate through the process. But so I think especially in New York State, it's taking a little longer as municipalities. I think they go to trade shows, they learn things, and they put us through our paces. Traffic studies, cutting trees down when the bats aren't, hibernating or reproducing our issues, some environmental issues, the amount of water we use, recycling systems. There's so many factors, traffic studies. It is becoming a little more difficult and certainly a lot more costly. Hiring engineers and attorneys. It's one of the biggest challenges to expanding, especially I think in our region.
And you said, you mentioned the people that you have in place, obviously that being a big part of it, the teams in place to actually build these locations. I know when we had Nathan Birch on, he was talking about when people are building washes for the first time, or maybe in the first couple ones, the importance of when you're putting bids out to subcontractors, whatever it is, if you're putting bids out to people who have maybe never built a car wash, they don't necessarily understand the scale of that project.
Yeah.
So how valuable is that to have people either who are on, who are members of your team, who are your staff members, or subcontractors who have done this kind of work before? How important is that when you're developing new sites?
Yeah, the contractors don't seem to have the appreciation of how much goes in the ground. The sand settling tanks, all the piping, electrical chases, to the auto cashiers. It amazes us how we have to stay on top of the contractors and inspect what they've just produced to make sure they haven't missed anything on the drawings. So that's the other thing. It's very important to have very accurate drawings, and to have people to really keep an eye on the construction progress and the process, to make sure the quality of the building is going to be what you get at the end of the project.
One thing I know we've talked about before on this podcast is staffing for growth and what that looks like. And obviously, when you have an aggressive growth plan over the next 2 years or so, how do you sort of deal with that when you look at from a staffing standpoint?
Yeah.
How do you look at in terms of your project teams and all the infrastructure behind that, all the support staff as well? How do you sort of make it so you're not being reactionary in terms of staffing those positions and saying, oh no, we actually need 50 more people in these specific roles?
Staffing is going to be the hardest part about our growth, for these next 10 stores, especially in such a short time period. Finding people will be the hardest thing. And we're trying to be creative with attracting people. We're increasing wages, benefits, and the good news is it's creating a lot of opportunities for our assistant manager staffs, and even store managers are getting promoted to to bigger, newer locations. So it's going to be really tricky.
And I guess on that part too, and you talked about this last time you were on, and you mentioned it earlier today too, the value of automation through your process.
Yeah.
How important is the role that technology plays in sort of helping mitigate those issues with labor and
Right.
what you guys are doing to.
Well, years ago we saw that wages were going to increase with the push to raise minimum wage a little faster, especially in New York State. So we started the automation project, years ago to try to wash cars faster and cleaner with fewer people, to kind of offset the struggle we were going to have. We really didn't see, obviously, COVID coming, and the labor shortage is much worse than we expected. So automation and putting in new equipment and modernizing our locations, is on a really fast pace to try to help mitigate this problem.
You talked about, one part of the contributing to the accelerated development cycle was developing a equipment company, which is Innovate. Can you talk a little bit about that process too, sort of the inception of Innovate and where that started? I know your own personal background with sort of starting in car wash equipment, and when that, moving through that process of saying we're going to be fabricating our own equipment to, we'll be fabricating our own equipment for us, plus some other people, to saying we really need to go after this thing, and we're going to be an equipment company that's manufacturing equipment for operators across the country, basically.
Well, I think what's happening with the consolidation in the equipment part of our industry, there are fewer choices for car wash operators. So going from a competitor's wash to our wash, we've always looked at trying to differentiate our experience with our customers, so they saw a difference, and I think they see a difference, they hear a difference, and then they're going to see the quality of the vehicle is improved. So we're using a lot of high pressure to knock the sand and the salt off the car and the snow and the ice, just really trying to create a better experience. So Innovate It basically becomes our sandbox to help produce some of the great ideas we come up with at our own locations, and to share it with the industry, and to create the infrastructure at the equipment company will make our Hoffman Car Wash a stronger company, but it also helps share our ideas with the industry.
I think there's obviously certainly that value there of having the testing grounds being your own washes, high volume washes where you can test and look and understand the issues, and then anything that's in place that you need to tinker with or adjust, you're right down the road to either make the changes on the fly there or bring it back here and make those adjustments before it goes to another wash to test again.
Right. And what's unique about us, like you said, we have our own little sandbox, our test washes right near our facility. we build the equipment, we build the motor control centers for them, and the motor or in the all the in electrical controls, and we write our own software. So we're kind of a unique, I think, company where we basically check the box in all those different areas to create some really unique equipment.
And I think there's that advantage too. I know when people come and tour the washes, or people who have seen it, and probably I know that's kind of what Shane talked about, is that how it initially starts. People come through the washes, they're doing tours and pointing out certain pieces and saying, well, this is interesting, where is this from? And saying, we build it ourselves, basically. Yeah. There's obviously the value there too. When Innovate started, was there an initial lineup of equipment they thought this is the lane that we're going to stay in, or was that always, we'll start here, but we plan on going to point B?
It really all started, actually, we wrote software to control our self-serve car washes and also our tunnel controllers. We've always written our own and built our own control systems for that. And then traveling around the world, really, I went to Germany, and I became really good friends with the Ennings, and Dr. Enning had developed a following wheel blaster to help clean the brake dust off the wheels more effectively. And our good friend Mike Mounts down at Cloister Car Wash down in Pennsylvania bought one and needed help with the software. So I went down and wrote the software for that tunnel and the wheel blaster. And so Dr. Enning developing that wheel blaster, that was kind of getting our foot wet into the equipment business. And we started building, wheel blasters for really a couple of decades, it feels like. And that's one of the most unique and effective pieces of equipment we build right now. And then the high pressure for automating the prepping process, that came next. And chemical dispensing, delivering the washing solutions, became an important part of what we do, and partnering with a lot of the chemical companies around the country. So
I'm glad you brought up the wheel blaster, because that's one I know when we go to trade shows, it's always one that you get a lot of questions about the actual development of it and how it works and what it all is. So can you just go a little bit back about, so that initial wheel blaster, how different is that from the version that we see today in the washes?
Sure. Yeah, it automatically tracks the wheel and adjusts its speed based on your conveyor speed. So we're picking up a pulse switch signal, and it automatically follows the car and follows the wheel and cleans it effectively, no matter what your conveyor speed. And it doesn't touch the wheel at all, so it's a touchless method of cleaning. You put your chemistry on the wheel to loosen the brake dust, and then that blasts it off using high pressure 0-degree rotating nozzles.
And now the initial versions were hydraulic, right? But then there was a move to electric, which helped alleviate some of any of the headaches that were happening.
Right. Yeah. The industry is moving toward electric control, and we recognized that was coming, and it actually helped us create a more reliable product. So there's no hydraulic lines, and speed control is so much easier using variable frequency drives and electric motors. So it was a big improvement. Yeah. Less moving parts.
Right, and it goes all back to automation too, right? The fewer things that you have to control, and just let your equipment essentially pick up those signals. The better quality that you're going to produce, because it's just an automated process. The more the machine's going to handle, the better. As long as its equipment's fabricated well and is able to do those things. You also talked about chemistry and the importance there of chemical applications. How much has that changed in the last in your time in the car wash industry? I know it's there's always new developments in terms of hyperconcentrates and those sort of things. But how important is that? The actual chemistry part of it, because I think a lot of times, I can't remember who we had on, was talking about the difference between somebody washing a car in the driveway versus washing your car at a car wash. One, besides the pressure. The second point of it is that if you don't have that chemistry piece of it, you're not going to be able to produce a good quality car.
Well, and because of the unlimited programs, maybe cars are a little easier to wash, especially our unlimited customers, because they're washing more frequently. But now that we're washing so many more cars, we're watching our expenses. So you don't want to waste water, so you're using as little water as possible when applying your alkalins and acids to the car, your washing solutions. So, in controlling things precisely, and accurately. So there's a lot more focus on conservation and using just enough to get a clean car, but not too much where a lot of it is wasted and falling off the car and hitting the ground.
I wanted to go back. So we talked about 10 sites that are going forward that are in the pipeline for Hoffman Car Wash. At the same time, I know a big area of focus for you, and I know Ron Sloan, our president, always talks about it, is the importance of reinvesting in the business. And so while those 10 stores are in the pipeline, there's still a lot that's happening in terms of retrofitting old sites, from the, just aesthetically from the buildings to the whole equipment package. So how does that exactly work for you in terms of the sites that you're addressing, and how important is it to go back and look at those, some of those older sites to ensure that they're in line with what you're doing moving forward?
Right. I mean, the initial investment is so huge now, and over the years, the equipment gets a little tired, and your buildings need to be renovated. So we've always been a strong believer in taking our profits and reinvesting them in our older stores to keep them refreshed and up to date. So, and especially again with the automation, we're going back to older stores where we are prepping cars and we're installing our pumps and our high pressure automated blasting equipment to help keep the locations like the new ones we're building.
Yeah, it goes back again probably to that's the customer experience as well, right? You talked about that with
Oh, yeah.
Jiffy Lube being, you don't want it to be any different for your customers. And a lot of these sites, in terms of a whole, if you look at it, there's not a huge geographic separation between them. You could easily visit 3 or 4 sites in one day if you wanted to, down.
Yep.
And so if you're getting a way better wash at one than the other, it's just, for the customer, it doesn't make sense. You want to be able to get the value of it, especially with something like an unlimited program where you can wash at any of them.
Yep.
You want to have the ability to wash at anyone and receive
Similar
the same
experience.
Yeah,
Yep.
Right. So in terms of those 10 sites moving forward, what does that timeline look like for you now as you look to develop those 10 sites in terms of, when you think you'll have ready to be washing
Right.
again?
So our install crew seems to take about 75 days or so. So we're staging them in such a way to hopefully move the crew from one store to the next. And we're also, we split up crews when we have some overlap. So it's going to be really challenging. But, again, scheduling is really important in planning. And that's why we think we're going to be able to pull it off in the next, year and a half. And we're also continuing to look for more sites. We're going to, keep going and keep building.
If you had to put a rough number on a percentage of sites that you say you identify as sites that this is a prime site to build a wash, what percentage of those sites actually becomes all the way through the process, ground up build, car wash?
Yep.
From the ones
Well,
you
we're
identify?
actually getting pretty good at identifying a site and recognizing that the market and the municipality, will approve it. So we get it under contract, contingent on municipal approvals, and even the property owners are getting a little more impatient with how long they want to tie up a site, and then the municipalities are taking longer to approve. So we're buying more on really spec now than we ever have in the past. But usually within the first 90 days, you can get a good sense of whether or not you're going to be able to get a site approved. Plus, having a track record and sites around, the whole region, people are very familiar with the way we operate. And I think also our landscaping and flowers and our curb appeal, creating jobs in the community and providing a valuable service like a car wash has really helped us. To get back to your percentage question, it seems like we're at 90 to 95%. If we find a site, get it under contract, we're going to be able to build and open a car wash there.
And you touched on it, and I know we've talked about it with other operators before too, the importance of having that relationship basically as a or being seen as a good neighbor within the community. So whether that's through community involvement or like you're saying, from the landscaping perspective and aesthetically, people don't want to have some sort of eyesore building in there.
Right.
Like if they have an idea, if they have an idea in their minds of what a car wash is, it really helps to have a very clear vision of this is what this car wash brings. This is what this business brings to our community in terms of, like you're saying, jobs, in terms of overall the service that they're providing, in terms of
There's
aesthetic
hundreds
appeal.
of little things that go into, making a successful business, really, and especially a car wash.
And then, so looking forward now for Innovate It too, what are you seeing in that in terms of the time, in terms of projections for the next couple of years and what you're hoping to get out of Innovate It in the next, as you go forward, kind of alongside with Hoffman Car Wash?
We're developing new areas of the business, recycling systems, RO, so a little more on the water side. Some friction equipment is in our future, so we're working hard to build that team, hire more people, and to be able to produce more equipment back there.
in this brand new building now, so much so they have to build more office space back there now to make
Right,
room
right.
for.
Well, it's a good problem to have. Well,
Right.
hopefully we're going to run out of room and need a bigger building.
And so next up for you, you'll be at the Southwest show, right? No,
Yes.
no speaking engagements there for you?
No, not that I
time?
know of yet.
Not yet. Well, I want to be conscious of your time here, but I really appreciate being on. And, I think you have number 1 or number 2, maybe all-time show so far. So we'll see if we can run a
All
repeat
right.
here and take over that mantle now. So thanks again for joining, Tommy. Thanks
All
for your
right.
time.
Thank you.
All right, thanks. Well, that's it for today's show. Thanks again to our guest, Tom Hoffman Jr., for joining us. You can visit Innovative Car Wash at the Southwest Car Wash Convention and Expo. We'll be at booth 823, and you can always find us at innovativecarwash.com. And find the Modern Car Wash podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for joining. See you next time.